The time is just gone 14 minutes past 9. If you have just tuned in, this is News and Views, the Monday morning edition, usually with Julie Ali. I'm just standing in for her. She hasn't been well this morning, so we wish her well. But great to be with you. And we are now moving on to the second half of this morning's broadcast of News and Views. And still to come on the broadcast this morning, we're taking a look at targeting the journalists in Palestine, in Gaza, with the ongoing genocide, and also taking a look at some local stories. This information, obviously, with regards to a number of issues. The key issue here is looking at the Women's Month, August as well. So we're going to be talking with Maria Mkwanda, also taking a look with regards to what is taking place in the UK. Now, this is horrific. If you have seen the images, if you have been following the news in the UK, right-wing fascists as well, taking on the police, a lot of damage as well. And to a large extent, in certain areas, police were actually helpless. If you've watched what took place at the Holiday Inn Express, where police were on the side, but just due to sheer numbers, unable to prevent some of these fascist protesters getting in there, pulling out chairs, throwing all sorts of furniture around as well. So clearly, what is taking place in the UK at this point in time, thuggery at the highest level. But right now, we're going across to South African journalist Deshnee Subramany. We are talking about the targeting of journalists, and this actually ties in quite well with what we at Salam Media will be doing come the 20th of August, with the arrival of award-winning Al Jazeera journalist Yumna Al-Sayed, who will be the guest of Salam Media and right across the entire country for a period of around 12 to 13 days. So take a look out for Yumna Al-Sayed coming to South Africa. We will be sharing a lot of detail with regards to her visit. But Deshnee Subramany on standby. Deshnee, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Yes, Deshnee, looking at journalists, the targeting of journalists, this clearly has been a major concern right across the journalistic fraternity. And just looking at it, from your side, South Africa, looking at South African journalists and our response to the killing of these journalists in Palestine, what should our response be?
South African journalists have formed a movement. I'm sure you remember in January, we held a vigil for journalists who had been killed in Palestine since October 7th. And already those numbers were quite appalling. Things are just getting worse. And we have now, as a movement, decided to move into an organization, which we are now calling Journalists for Apartheid, against apartheid, sorry. And so this is an important movement for us because we really need to start being honest about what is happening. I won't lie, it has been quite a difficult conversation as well, but everyone is on the same page. We're all against apartheid. We are all for Palestine. It still just becomes a little bit of a tricky situation for some people because they're just not sure what to say. Media in general is always perceived as what people call objective. But, as you know, and I think people around the world know now, that journalism cannot be objective. There's no such thing as objective. It is about everyone is subjective. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a point of view. They are there. They're seeing it. The trick is to be able to use your subjectivity and still be able to tell the truth, which is the request that we have for moral human beings in general. And I think the faster we become acquainted with that concept, the better it will be for all of us. We are really, really concerned. I'm sure you saw the last two Al Jazeera journalists. I'm sorry, it's just quite an emotional story, who were targeted while trying to cover a bombing, and trying to cover the killing of the Hamas leader. It was so obvious what was happening that it's almost stunning. You don't even need to say, we know what you did, because it's very clear to all of us. And so, as South African journalists and as South Africans in general, we support the government in its perspective, and we are pro-Palestine, and we will be forever.
Yes, you mentioned a number of things, Destiny. You speak about being objective, being subjective at the end of the day, but also at the same time, we're talking about honesty, we're talking about integrity. And sometimes there are huge question marks that are raised, particularly when one looks at mainstream media in terms of honesty, in terms of integrity of reporting. And this is where independent media obviously plays a huge role. But also, what is encouraging to note is groups of South African journalists coming together. They've seen reality, the hard facts are actually facing them. And we know the power of the media because if you look at Gaza, for instance, you look at the genocide that is unfolding, there is a military war that is being fought, but there is also a huge media war that is taking place.
Mm. Yeah, we are quite encouraged that SANEF has recently released a statement to say that they stand with Palestine, which is quite welcomed by us. It also speaks to the point I was making about how journalists just don't really know how to deal with this. But independent media is something that we should all be rooting for. And it isn't really about the organizations that are currently owning media. It's more about the fact that we need more voices. We need more people to say the things that they need to say. But we also need better competition because if you've got different independent media organizations saying things differently, it can expand the public's mind in terms of how we want to phrase things. And it also shows people that there's a different way in which we can't do journalism all the time. I don't know if you follow some of the international organizations online, like on Instagram and on TikTok, things like BTS News and others, which really have found a way to tell the news in a way that is clear and also that tells the truth. Because a lot of the time we find that because of the time constraints and staffing constraints that we see in newsrooms at the moment, people aren't able to tell the truth because the truth requires time. It requires journalists to be able to read, to be able to talk to more than two people, to be able to leave their desks really and do journalism the way they need to be doing it. So we really hope that, in South Africa, we do have a funding problem. We have a situation where it's quite difficult for people just to be able to even be freelancers. As you know, the media industry in South Africa is really struggling. I've had so many phone calls, messages from people just looking for work because they're either facing retrenchments or they've gotten to a point where burnout is so bad they cannot continue in the newsroom. And, this goes back to the lack of staffing and lack of resources. So we hope that we'll be able to see more of it, but it really requires us as South Africans to get together and understand why media is so important. People cannot, the general public, they're not able to go and talk to people because it's not their job. They have 9 to 5s and other jobs they need to do. They've got hobbies, they've got families. Our job is to be able to do that. It's our dedicated work time that we put into it, which is why we need more journalists to be doing this. Journalism as a job needs to be able to function. And so, yeah, that's more of the worrying perspective. And this translates across the board. It's not just about the Palestine situation. We are seeing this with every situation. And that's why I wanted to bring back to the idea of how telling the truth is also, a moral perspective. It is about us as people also telling the truth. You can see in families, to give this example where there's a difficult family member and everyone just papers over it, right? Or a family member who's going through a difficult time. And then you ask some of the elders what's going on and they will say, no, everything is fine, we're fine. But we're not able to tell the truth. We're not able to be honest. And that comes with vulnerability, which I hope we'll be able to do more of.
Well, I'm certain, we can, but as you mentioned, the key issue here is when one looks at the corporate media by comparison to independent media, the levels of investment, and sadly, we don't
Mhm.
have that investment, and
Mm,
this is something of major concern. Again, you expect the truth to come out. You need to be objective, obviously, but at the same time, we are human. Journalists are human beings as well. And this is the reason why we are so excited about Yumna Al Said, who is
mm,
an award-winning journalist who's been in the coalface, who's been there during the time that the genocide had actually unfolded. And I'm sure, she's going to bring so much by way of her experiences, her expertise, but also being a humanitarian. Because this is exactly what Yumnal said, saying, my motivation has always been to convey the human stories of people and be the voice of the voiceless.
I mean, there is this idea that bringing in journalists into Gaza that are from other organizations, from Western media, will contribute to the so-called objectivity of the situation, which is a fallacy. There is no way that we can discount the professionalism of the journalists in Palestine. They are standing there as they are starving, as they are unable to sleep, as they are scared for their own families, as they are seeing their colleagues, their friends being targeted. We cannot doubt the professionalism and the ethical standing that they come from in terms of the story. And I think Yumna is one of those people who really embodies this and not to essentialize or to make one person, triumph over others. This is of all the journalists in Palestine who continue to stand up, who continue to take those stories forward, who continue to just be able to, or try to be able to do their jobs, And it's important that we remember that these journalists are really there looking at it. And we trust other journalists when they are looking at it. We should be trusting Palestinian journalists too. Anyone who thinks that a Palestinian journalist is being biased is actually... is misunderstanding themselves, in fact, to be honest, because they will be able to see, if you watch the visuals coming out, you can see it in social media. It's not just Palestinian journalists who are sharing these things. It's Palestinians in general who are sharing these things. And so we are able to verify that way that what they are saying is true. And so that is the important thing. If we are able to see Palestinian journalists as human beings, if we're able to see Palestinian journalists as professionals, we are able to tell each other that this is the truth.
Well, hopefully, Deshnee, I'm sure you would want to also meet up with Yumna Saeed as well. And, hopefully as well, many other journalists, both from corporate independent journalists, you mentioned Senef as well. We hope that during her visit, other journalists will get exposure to Yumna Saeed. And, I'm sure that is going to go a long way in terms of what journalists like yourselves actually stand for and what you are hoping to achieve. But for now, we thank you. We do appreciate you taking time out this morning with us, Deshnee.
Thank you so much. We look forward to engaging with Yumna. It will be an absolute privilege.
Deshnee Subramany with us this morning, South African journalist. A quick break. We'll be back.